Hi, I'm Clara, and on my birthday, I carried a cake to my parents' house, only to see them gift my sister a mansion while forgetting I existed. They ignored my homemade creation, but the lottery ticket I hid in their gift bag, it wasn't just worth a fortune. It was about to unravel their lies in a way they'd never see coming. I woke up to the familiar creak of my ceiling fan, and no birthday text from Mom. Just the hum of the refrigerator, and a soft ache I'd tried to ignore. I turned over and reached for my phone, half expecting a message, anything, but the lock screen just showed the date, my birthday, a Wednesday, and not a single notification from the people who were supposed to remember me. Growing up, birthdays were always a shared event, me and Natalie 2 years apart, but always treated like one person when it came to cake and candles. But once she hit her influencer's stride, the shared part disappeared, just like the attention. I rolled out of bed and shuffled into the kitchen. The smell of almond extract and orange zest still lingered from last night. The cake sat finished on the counter, my own recipe, light, citrusy, layered with patience and sugar. I'd made it for them. I told myself it didn't matter whether they remembered, but part of me still hoped. After a quiet breakfast and a quick shower, I boxed the cake carefully, folding the corners of the wax paper as if it were something sacred. I didn't bother dressing up, just jeans and a soft green blouse. I drove the 20 minutes to my parents' house with the cake seatbelted beside me like a fragile passenger. Their driveway was full. I hesitated. Mom hadn't mentioned guests. For a moment, I allowed myself to think, maybe a surprise for me. But as I stepped closer, I heard the laughter, bright, rehearsed, Natalie's voice. "You didn't have to do all this. Oh my God, is that Prosecco?" I walked through the open front door and froze. The living room was decked out with silver and blue streamers, helium balloons brushing the ceiling, and an enormous canvas sign, "Welcome home, Natalie." She stood in the middle of it all, radiant as ever, phone in hand, posing with the perfect, just surprised expression. A small crowd had gathered, relatives, neighbors, her brand manager. My mother stood beside her, clutching a glass of wine. Dad was beaming. I cleared my throat. No one noticed. I moved toward the kitchen, cake still in hand, and set it gently on the corner of the buffet table next to a tower of store-bought cupcakes branded with Natalie's initials in edible glitter. "Clara, you're here!" Natalie's voice cut through, syrupy sweet. "Oh, that little cake is so quaint. Too bad we're all focused on my new place." She laughed and the room echoed her. My chest tightened, but I forced a smile. "Oh, Clara, sweetie." Mom finally noticed me. She walked over, barely touching my shoulder. "Could you help with the photo? We're doing a group shot." I opened my mouth to speak. She cut me off with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I swallowed hard, picked up the camera someone had left on the counter, and took the photo. From behind the lens, I watched Dad pull something from his pocket, a shiny brass key. "This," he declared, "is for you, sweetheart. A new place, 4 bedrooms, all yours." The room erupted in cheers. I kept taking pictures, my hands mechanical. My cake sat untouched in the corner, fading into the background like I always had. Someone called for a toast. I turned away, breathing through my nose, and found a spot near the table to disappear into. A kid, one of Natalie's friend's children, rushed past me and clipped the corner of the buffet. The cake box teetered, then fell. The sound it made, soft, wet, final. I knelt instinctively, hands shaking as I gathered the pieces. One layer cracked clean down the center. Mom looked over, sighed. "Really, Clara, you should have been more careful," she said, her voice dripping with blame. "It's not like anyone was going to eat that anyway." No one offered to help. No one even moved. I stood slowly, clutching the box like something dead. The crowd had moved on. More photos, more praise. My cake and me along with it forgotten. Back at my apartment, I slid off my shoes at the door. I opened the freezer, shifted a bag of corn and made space. I placed the broken cake inside like it deserved saving. I walked to my small kitchen table. I pulled out the envelope I'd tucked in my purse that morning, a lottery ticket I hadn't had the heart to gift them. I left my own birthday carrying a cake no one wanted, but they had no idea what else I had carried out that day. I didn't cry when I got home. I didn't scream or throw anything. I just took off my shoes, set the box with the ruined cake on the counter, and stood there, listening to the distant hum of dryers spinning below. It was almost 8, and the autumn rain had started. My dinner sat untouched on the stove, reheated casserole. I wasn't hungry. The kitchen table was cluttered with leftovers I'd brought back from the party, some half-eaten brownies, a few muffins, and 2 envelopes. Cards I'd slipped into Mom and Dad's gift bags earlier that morning. I hadn't even signed them, just simple scratch-off tickets. Nothing fancy, just a little joke, a small wish tucked into glittery cardstock. They hadn't even opened them. I sat down, my fingers ran along the edge of one envelope. The other sat beside it, still perfectly sealed, like it had never even been touched. I picked up the last ticket, the one I'd kept in my purse as a backup. I hadn't meant to scratch it today. It was supposed to be the just-in-case card, in case theirs were all duds. In case someone laughed and said, "Ah, nice try." I'd planned to say, "Here, one more. Maybe this one's the winner." Now, here it was in my hand, curled a little from the warmth of my bag. I grabbed a dime from the drawer and started scratching it. 3 matching numbers. I paused, leaned closer. 3 matching numbers again. I stared. $250,000, 0 cents. My hand didn't shake right away. It took a second for my brain to catch up, for a breath to hitch, for my heart to say, "Wait, did that just happen?" I blinked, checked again, Googled the code on the back twice. It was real. I sat there, silent, with that ticket resting in my palm like something radioactive. For a long moment, I didn't feel joy, not even relief, just a strange kind of silence, like the world had paused to ask me a single question. Now what? My phone buzzed. A text from Natalie. "Heard you were sulking at home. Don't make this about you, Clara. It's my day." I stared, the ticket burning in my hand. Her words lit a fuse I didn't know I had. My first thought wasn't noble. It wasn't, "Oh, I should still give it to them." It was a flicker of instinct. Pull away, protect. But then my conscience, the one shaped by decades of family dinners and Sunday sermons, whispered, "You always said you'd give it to them if it hit, that it would be a gift to the whole family, but families don't leave their daughters standing alone on their birthday, do they? They don't hand the golden child a house and ask the other to take the picture. They don't throw away the cake you spent all night making and sigh like you were a burden to begin with." I looked down at the ticket again. "A gift only matters," I said aloud, "when someone believes you're worth receiving it." I folded the ticket carefully, slipped it into a clean envelope, and tucked it into my top drawer, next to my passport, expired coupons, and that photo of me and Natalie as kids on a tire swing. Then I grabbed the 2 unopened envelopes off the table, walked to the trash and dropped them in. I grabbed a sticky note from the fridge and wrote, "If no one remembers your birthday, maybe it's time to start living like it's a new year." I stuck it on the cabinet above the sink and stared at it. After cleaning up the table, I opened my laptop and typed into the search bar, "Affordable apartments outside Raleigh." Then I opened another tab, "Culinary programs for adults." "Maybe Wilmington," I muttered, "or Greensboro." I paused, thought about telling them, but I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't open the family group chat that Natalie dominated with her links and her filtered photos and her quotes about living intentionally. I didn't draft a text to Mom. The truth was, they wouldn't notice if I left, and maybe that's why I had to. That night, I made 2 decisions. I would keep the ticket, and I would leave without telling anyone. I didn't sleep much after that night. Some people stay up planning revenge. I stayed up researching apartment leases and culinary certifications. Within 12 days, I'd packed what little I owned, gave notice at the diner, and signed a lease for a tiny studio in Wilmington. One room, slanted ceilings, and a kitchen barely big enough to turn around in. But it had one thing my childhood home didn't: silence that didn't hurt. 3 weeks had passed since the birthday that wasn't. I hadn't replied to Mom's single text, "Heard you left town. Hope you're not being dramatic again." Dad didn't text at all, but I saw his missed call and ignored the voicemail. It was Sunday. I was up early for my culinary class project, sourcing local produce from the farmer's market. The rain had cleared, replaced by a warm, misty morning. I wore my apron over jeans, pulled my curls back, and tucked a small notebook under my arm. I didn't expect to see anyone I knew. That was the point of being here. I was scanning a stand of heirloom beets when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Well, if it isn't Margaret's little baker." I turned slowly. Aunt Beatrice. She looked the same. Flowy scarf, sunglasses on her head, silver-gray hair twisted up into a lazy bun. She held a basket filled with herbs and blueberries. "Clara?" She blinked, surprised. "What are you doing here?" I fumbled for a smile. "Hey, small world. I'm in a culinary program, long overdue." "That's wonderful." She smiled softly. "Your grandmother would have loved that." We ended up sitting at one of the shaded picnic tables near the coffee cart. I bought her a black tea, myself a chamomile. She looked at me for a long moment. "Your mom didn't mention you moved, though. I suppose things have been a bit tense?" I shrugged. "They've got their hands full with Natalie's brand expansion, or whatever she's calling it now." Beatrice sipped her tea. "I figured you might have been upset about the inheritance." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what inheritance?" She paused. "From your grandmother, Margaret." My body went still. "I was told you didn't want anything, that you'd said no. Wanted Natalie to handle things." I couldn't breathe. "Who told you that?" She looked surprised by my reaction. "Your mother." "Patricia said you didn't care about Grandma's legacy," Beatrice added, her voice low. "She told me you called it Natalie's burden and walked away. Clara, is that true?" I shook my head, my voice barely a whisper. "I never said that. Never." I set my cup down. "I never said that." A long silence settled between us. Then she sighed. She got the house, the garden, the little trust fund Margaret had set aside. I stood up. "I need to go," I said. "Clara," but I was already walking away. Back in my apartment, I didn't sit down. I went straight to my email, opened the folder I hadn't touched in years, old family docs. There it was, a scanned PDF of my grandmother's will, dated 3 years ago. I read the line 3 times. "The estate shall be divided equally between my granddaughters, Natalie and Clara." Not a footnote, not a maybe, clear as day. I dropped into my chair, my hands trembling against the edge of the desk. Then I remembered something. Grandma's old friend, Leonard Harris. He was a lawyer, a quiet man with kind eyes. He handled her affairs at least until she fell ill. I'd sent him a holiday card last year. His number was still in my contacts. I called. He answered after the second ring. "Harris residence. Mr. Harris, it's Clara. Clara Vaughn." "Clara?" He sounded warm but slightly confused. "Well, it's been a while. Do you have a minute? It's about my grandmother's estate." A pause. "Of course." I told him what Beatrice said, about the inheritance, about Natalie. There was another pause, longer this time. "I remember Natalie and your mother came in about a month before Margaret passed. They said you'd agreed to transfer your portion, so we finalized the updated paperwork." "I never signed anything," I said, my voice thin. He was quiet again. "I assumed you had. I never saw the original copy after that day, just the version they brought in. I retired shortly after." My stomach turned. "Clara," he began, cautious, "do you still have your original?" "I do. I'd suggest you get someone to look at both, compare signatures, dates, and make sure nothing was filed without proper verification." I ended the call staring at my phone for a long time. They didn't just forget my birthday, they erased me from a legacy I was part of. After that phone call with Mr. Harris, something in me stopped trying to rationalize. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the ceiling of my studio apartment. This wasn't an accident. This was a pattern. 6 weeks had passed since my birthday, and I was still peeling back layers of what I hadn't seen before. The bakery classes kept my hands busy, and my evenings at the cafe gave me just enough structure not to fall apart. The message came in around 4:00 p.m. on a rainy Monday while I was prepping orange glaze at my counter. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom's number. I wiped my fingers on a towel before picking it up. "Don't worry about Clara. She'll get over it, like always. Focus on the press release for your brand launch." I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't respond. I just slid the phone face down on the counter and continued stirring the glaze. Later that day at school, the burn happened. I'd never scorched a sauce in my life. It was a Mornay, simple enough, butter, flour, milk, cheese, but I let it sit half a second too long while zoning out, and just like that, it turned bitter. Vincent, my instructor, noticed immediately. He walked over and lowered the heat, then gently nudged me toward the side prep area. "Clara," he said quietly, "what's going on?" I opened my mouth to make an excuse. Long day, bad sleep, maybe a headache, but what came out instead was something I hadn't said aloud before. "My whole life, I thought being good would be enough," I murmured. Turns out, I was supposed to be convenient too. Vincent didn't speak right away. He just nodded, his eyes kind, steady. "You don't owe anyone your silence." By evening, the drizzle had turned into a steady downpour. I was home, sipping lukewarm tea, when I made the mistake of opening social media. Natalie's page was glowing. "Legacy dinner for Grandma Margaret's vision," read the caption on one carousel of photos. There was my mother, raising a glass. My father, beaming next to Natalie in a blue silk dress that I'd helped her pick out last year for an entirely different occasion. The caption continued, "Celebrating the next chapter in our family story." Not a single photo included me. No mention, not even a blurry one from the background. They were rewriting everything. Not just the will, not just my role, but the entire narrative, the realization that they didn't just forget me. They preferred it that way. Around 9 p.m. my phone rang. Aunt Beatrice. I hesitated, then picked up. "Hi," I said. There was a pause. Then her voice came through low and cautious. "Clara, I just wanted to check on you." "I'm fine," I lied. "I saw some of the pictures." There was a beat of silence. Then Beatrice said something I didn't expect. "You know, once Patricia told me she regretted how she handled things with you, but it was always after the fact." I closed my eyes. "Of course she did," I whispered. "She said you were too sensitive," Beatrice added softly, "that you'd never handle the family legacy like Natalie could." I didn't believe her, Clara, but I didn't speak up either. Her words stung, a fresh cut over an old wound. I thanked Beatrice and hung up soon after. The apartment was quiet again, but now I didn't mind it. I pulled out a spiral-bound notebook from under the bed, one I'd used for class notes but had slowly started to repurpose. I began writing. Email from Grandma's lawyer confirming discrepancy. Text from Mom, "Don't worry about Clara." Social posts. Natalie called it Grandma's legacy. No mention of me. On a fresh page, I wrote one sentence, all by itself. They expect me to disappear quietly, but this time, silence is strategy. No grand speeches, no big confrontations, just documentation, proof, and intention. I wasn't going to shout, but I was going to be heard. The first thing I did after writing that sentence was open the fridge. Not because I was hungry, I just needed something to do with my hands, something simple, something grounding. My fingers brushed over a container of basil I'd bought at the farmer's market the weekend before. Grandma used to say, "Add basil when you're building layers. It doesn't shout, but it lingered." That was her way. Never flashy, never loud, but always unforgettable when you paid attention. The next morning at culinary school, Vincent assigned us a family recipe challenge. Reinvent something from home, not just replicate, reinterpret. I didn't have to think long. Grandma Margaret's roast. But this time I didn't want to copy it. I wanted to tell the truth of it. I swapped the sweetness out, added coriander and a dash of smoked chili, pushed the sear deeper. Darker. Instead of molasses glaze, I let the natural juices speak. Let the silence hang in the pan a second longer before deglazing. By the time Vincent took his first bite, the room had gone still. He set down his fork and looked at me, not like a teacher, but like someone seeing something click into place. "This isn't nostalgia," he said quietly. "It's something else." I nodded. "It's who I could have been if I wasn't always playing it safe." That's when he told me about the event, an industry tasting, invite only, where chefs present one dish to a panel of potential investors, restaurant owners, and legacy mentors, a place where names are made quietly over the course of a single evening. "You should enter," he said. "Present this." I blinked. "You think I'm ready?" He smiled. "Clara, this isn't about readiness. It's about being seen." My throat tightened. I looked down at the dish again. He added almost offhand, "You'll need to register under your real name. They need to know who's presenting." My first instinct was to say no. I shook my head slowly. If they find out I'm coming, they'll make sure I don't. Vincent didn't push, just said, "Then let them try." That night, back at my apartment, I pulled out Grandma's old recipe box, the one I'd kept hidden since the day they handed Natalie the house keys, and shoved my cake into the trash. Inside, behind a faded index card with roast notes scribbled in the margins, I found Tit. A small, folded scrap, her handwriting unmistakable to the quiet one. "One day your silence will say more than their noise ever could." She had seen me even when no one else had. I turned on my laptop and pulled up the registration page. Name: Clara Margaret Vaughn. I didn't flinch when I typed it. When the confirmation email came through, I stared at it for a minute before sending a single message to Aunt Beatrice. "I'm presenting Grandma's roast next Thursday. Don't tell them, but you're welcome." No emoji, no exclamation point, just the truth. The next day, I started sketching plating ideas in my prep notebook. Not because I needed them for class, but because this time, I wanted to offer more than a meal. I wanted to offer clarity. On the third page, I circled an ingredient Grandma always listed but that my mother never used. Not once. Allspice. She said it was too old-fashioned. I remembered the way Grandma had looked at me once when I was 11 and tried the roast with it for the first time. "You taste the difference?" she'd asked. I nodded. "That's what makes it bold," she'd said. "That's what makes it yours," I whispered aloud now. "This time they'll taste what they never dared to serve." I wasn't doing it for them, but I wasn't hiding from them either, and I didn't care who else found out. I should have known something was wrong the minute I stepped into the kitchen that morning. Vincent was already on edge, his jaw tight. He didn't greet me like usual. No nod, no quick morning. Instead, he pointed to the clipboard in the inspector's hands and whispered under his breath, "Brace yourself." The man in the white coat was polite but firm. "We received an anonymous tip about improper labeling and potential cross-contamination from this section." He gestured to my prep area with the flat of his pen. I blinked. "What? No, everything was double-checked yesterday. I went over it all before I left." The inspector didn't look convinced. He motioned to one of the assistants who started pulling ingredients off the shelf. The sauce base I'd made from scratch 2 nights ago, gone. My spice mixes, bagged and tagged. Even the thyme oil I'd infused myself had a yellow sticker slapped on it. "Without proper documentation, we can't allow these to be used in a public tasting," the inspector said. Vincent stayed calm, too calm, but I saw his jaw clench. "This didn't come from nowhere," he muttered once the inspector left. "Someone wants you off the board." He didn't need to say who. The moment he said someone, my stomach tightened. I could picture her. Natalie. "Clara, you're out of your depth," Natalie's voice hissed later, catching me alone in the hallway. "This is my stage. You're just embarrassing yourself." I met her gaze, unflinching. "Then why are you so scared of my dish?" Her eyes narrowed, but she turned away without a word. I didn't cry. Not then, but later that night, when I returned to the storage cooler to grab the backup sauce just in case, I found the shelf empty. Everything was gone. Not just my ingredients, but even the backup herbs I'd set aside with my name clearly labeled. Panic rose in my throat. I started opening every container, digging through bins. Nothing. That's when I got the notification. Natalie had posted a new reel, a close-up of a roast dish, framed just right, with a drizzle pattern I recognized too well. My plating, my garnish, my God. The same garnish I'd scribbled in my notebook 2 nights ago. Her caption read, "Inspired by legacy, reimagined for modern tables." I stared at the screen like it might shatter. Everything, every step, every intention, I'd laid it all out with care, and now it was public under her name. I stormed back into the prep room and slammed my notebook onto Vincent's desk. "It's all been taken," I said, my voice shaking. "The roast, the idea, even the ingredients. It's all hers now." Vincent looked up slowly. His eyes didn't pity me. They pierced right through the fury. "So now," he said evenly, "do you cook like someone afraid of losing, or do you cook like someone with nothing left to protect?" His words hit harder than anything that had happened all week. I walked back into the kitchen, my hands trembling, but not from fear this time. I began pulling out what was left. A few root vegetables, 1 bunch of wilting cilantro, cracked black pepper in a paper tin, and tucked at the back of the top shelf, a jar of allspice powder I had brought from home, the same one my mother always refused to use, called too harsh for company. I opened the lid and inhaled. Sharp, raw, familiar. I rolled my sleeves and started chopping. I adjusted the roast recipe 1 more time, not to salvage what had been stolen, but to build something that couldn't be duplicated. Something she'd never dare try to imitate, because it came from a place she didn't even know existed. I thought of Grandma again, her table, her stubborn hands, her quiet fire, and I thought of all the times I'd shrunk myself to fit into a family that praised silence but punished individuality. This version of the dish didn't ask permission. At 3 a.m., I plated it. Not perfect, but mine. I took a picture, not for posting, just for proof. A message popped up. "Lauren, I saw the post," she wrote. "Want me there? Just say it." I hesitated for only a second before replying. "Come early. Bring your camera. We're going to document everything they try to steal, because the only way to protect a story is to serve it before they can rewrite it." Lauren and I stood just inside the loading doors as the catering team rolled past with carts of linens and glassware. She adjusted the strap on her camera bag while I checked my crate of final ingredients for the 3rd time. "Ready?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. No, I thought, but I nodded. The tasting showcase was being held inside an old brick building, downtown, remodeled just enough to feel modern. 9 tables stretched across the room, each one under its own spotlight. Vincent's connections had gotten me booth number 7, and as we walked toward it, I realized who was stationed right beside me. Natalie, of course. She was in full bloom, flanked by 2 assistants, chatting up a local news anchor, while her boyfriend held a mirror for last-minute lipstick checks. She wore one of Grandma's old brooches, turned sideways like it was her own logo now. She caught my eye and smiled, polite, empty, calculated. I said nothing and began unloading my crate. Lauren sat up discreetly, blending in like press, filming quietly from over my shoulder. I had barely started arranging my tools when a young chef with a man bun and clipboard walked past. "Hey," he said, casually nodding toward my table. I froze. "Excuse me?" But he had already moved on, heading toward the judge's table. Lauren stopped filming. "What the hell was that?" Before I could answer, I caught a snippet of conversation from behind Natalie's booth. Investors are leaning toward the Vaughn brand. No one wants to back a wild card. It's about consistency, not kitchen drama. Wild card. My name had become a whisper, a liability. I turned back to my booth and stared at the handouts I had printed, pages explaining my process, the ingredient story, and even a tribute to Grandma Margaret. Something looked off. I picked one up. It wasn't mine. The pages were glossy, printed in a corporate serif font entitled, "Inspired by the Vaughn family's culinary legacy." My name appeared once, buried at the bottom of the last page, like a legal disclaimer. Lauren saw my hands tremble. "They changed it," I said flatly. "They rewrote it," she corrected. I didn't speak. I just reached for the chalkboard we had packed, the one Lauren had offered as a backup in case I wanted something more personal. With one piece of white chalk, and a deep, steady breath, I wrote the phrase I'd been repeating to myself all week. Some recipes are inherited, others are reclaimed. The judges began to circulate. They weren't flashy, no entourage, no fanfare, just notebooks, keen eyes, and seasoned palates. Then I saw him, William Carter, one of the main investors Natalie had tried to charm through Patricia months ago. He stopped in front of my booth and looked at the plate. It was bold, raw edges, a burnt sienna sauce with flecks of hand-ground allspice and roasted orange peels. No garnish for decoration, only what mattered. He leaned in. "Is this the original roast I've been hearing about?" I met his gaze. "No," I said, "that one was taken. This one's mine." He nodded slowly, then reached for the spoon. I held my breath, but before it touched the plate, I heard the voice I'd been dreading. "Well, isn't this a family affair?" Natalie said sweetly, stepping up beside him, holding her own silver tasting spoon. She looked down at the dish, then at the chalkboard, her smile tight. I didn't flinch, but I did look her dead in the eye and say she loved the truth more. Natalie held the spoon like she was about to perform. She dipped it into the roasted medallion, dragged it across the sauce, and brought it to her lips with practiced grace. Then she paused. For a second, her expression cracked. She swallowed, then straightened her back like she'd tasted vinegar instead of allspice and citrus. "It's bold," she managed, voice clipped. That's when Patricia swept in. She was dressed for television, not taste. Her eyes scanned the crowd and then landed on me, already narrowing before she spoke. "You've made this a spectacle," she said, loud enough for the investors nearby to hear. "You always do this, Clara," she spat, her voice venomous. "You turn everything into your little pity party. Just let Natalie shine for once." The room froze, all eyes on me. I didn't waver. "I'm not here for pity, Mom. I'm here for what's mine." I didn't blink. Natalie stepped just slightly behind our mother, like she always did when things got confrontational. I reached into my apron. From the inner pocket I pulled out the small envelope, cream-colored, unmarked, aged slightly at the corners where I had handled it too often. I held it up. "This is the ticket I gave you," I said, my voice calm but firm. "The one you didn't bother to open. The one you threw away, like every other thing I've tried to give this family." There was a ripple through the room, an audible hush, like someone had lowered the volume of everything but my voice. "And yet," I continued, turning toward the panel of investors and judges, "this entire showcase, this moment, was built on what they threw away. I didn't get here by accident. I got here by salvaging what was left." Right then, Lauren stepped forward. She had her phone in hand, screen already lit. With a subtle nod to the tech crew handling the AV for the event, she tapped the play button and held it up to the overhead mic. From the speakers came Patricia's voice, recorded just days earlier, grainy but clear enough. "No one wants Clara's version of the story anyway. It's too sad, too messy. Natalie's is cleaner, brighter, more promotable." Then came the sound of camera shutters, journalists typing, investors murmuring. A judge stepped forward and pointed to my booth. "And yet, this is the only original dish here tonight. The only one that hasn't been spoon-fed through a press kit." Another followed. "We've heard enough PR. I'd rather back a chef who cooks from scars, not strategy." Patricia opened her mouth to speak again, but no sound came. Natalie backed away first. For once she had no line to close the scene. A silver-held man with a soft voice stepped up to my table, placing a business card gently beside my chalkboard sign. He looked me in the eye. "We're prepared to back your concept," he said, "but only if the story stays yours. Your voice, your kitchen." I looked at the card, then back at him, and behind me Lauren whispered, "They're leaving." I turned and saw them. My mother, my sister, walking away, heels tapping on the showroom floor like punctuation marks to the last sentence they didn't get to write. They left that night without another word, and I didn't chase after them. I didn't have to. 8 months later, the soft rustle of napkins and low hum of clinking forks filled the space I once only dared to sketch on notebook paper. My restaurant wasn't big, just 32 seats. The name painted on the front window read Clara, No frills, no italics, just mine. I walked the floor slowly, checking in with each table. It was a soft launch, but every seat was taken. Lauren had helped spread the word without making it about revenge. She said, "Let the food talk first." I still wore the same apron I'd used in culinary school. It still held the lottery ticket, unscratched, not because I was afraid of losing, but because I'd already won something better. Some things are worth more unsaid. Near the corner of the room, a four-top table sat quietly. Patricia, Natalie, Lauren, Aunt Beatrice. Lauren sat between the three of them like a bridge trying to stay steady between two collapsing banks. But tonight wasn't about making anything perfect. It was about letting the truth take up space. I brought the final course to their table myself, a reimagined version of the cake they'd once let fall to the floor like it meant nothing. This time it was smaller, more refined. Almond sponge layered with dark chocolate ganache and orange zest cream. Same foundation, but deeper now, grown up, sharper. Patricia stared at it. So did Natalie. I set the plate down in front of them without ceremony. "Same recipe," I said quietly. "Less sugar." No one reached for their forks right away. I thought for a moment, then replied with clarity I didn't know I had until the words came out. "No, this is how I feed people who are still learning what love tastes like." It wasn't sharp, it wasn't cruel, it just was. From across the room, the front door opened and in walked Harper, once my fiercest rival in culinary school. She looked nervous, holding a small folder. "I heard you're hiring prep cooks," she said, standing just shy of the hostess stand. I nodded. "If you bring your own recipes this time," I said gently. She exhaled, grateful. The night wound down. I returned to the kitchen where the air was warm, with orange peel and basil. Lauren stepped inside, a frame tucked under her arm. "It came today," she said. She handed it to me. A photograph, black and white, of me mid-laugh, spoon in one hand, flames rising from a pan behind me. Beneath it she had written, "Built from the scraps they left behind." I placed it near the door, where guests could see it as they left. They thought the ticket would have broken me, or that I'd beg for their approval with it. But I didn't need their validation to rise. The cake they discarded became my signature, and though Patricia and Natalie sat at my table, their forks untouched, I knew reconciliation wasn't promised. Some wounds don't heal. They just teach you to cook with sharper flavors.